The tray shattered first, skidding across the cafeteria tiles in a shriek of metal and plastic, and then the scream followed, raw and involuntary, tearing through the bright noon air as hands grabbed a girl's shoulders and yanked her backward while the room froze in a heartbeat of disbelief. If you believe stories can still hold hope, compassion, and second chances, then viewers of Broken Smill are invited right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because what follows begins in cruelty but refuses to end there. The cafeteria at Fort Alderwick was washed in daylight, sunlight pouring through tall windows and reflecting off stainless steel counters and polished floors. It was a place meant for routine and relief, for recruits to forget the rigid lines of drills and orders for exactly 30 minutes. Trays moved along rails, boots scuffed, laughter occasionally broke through the institutional hum. In the center of it all stood Mara Valen, slim shoulders tense beneath a standard-issue jacket that still felt like a costume she hadn't earned. She had grown up in a quiet coastal town where the loudest sound was the foghorn, raised by a father who fixed boats and a mother who hummed while sewing sails. Enlisting had been her way of outrunning grief after the ocean took her father in a winter storm, her way of proving she could stand upright against forces that didn't care about kindness. But crowds still overwhelmed her, sudden touches still made her flinch, and the cafeteria felt like a test she had never studied for. The recruits who closed in on her moved with the nervous energy of boys trying to become something harder. Their own histories clung to them like invisible packs. Kellen Rourke had grown up learning that weakness invited pain, raised by a stepfather whose fists spoke louder than words. Ilya Benton carried the shame of being the kid who never fought back in school, now desperate to rewrite his story with muscle and volume. Tomas Reed, wide-shouldered and loud, masked the terror of failing out and being sent back to a town that had already decided he was nothing. When a rumor passed between them, sparked by a careless glance and a misunderstanding born from fear, it ignited something ugly and immediate. They mistook Mara's distant stare and tight posture for contempt, for judgment, for a threat to their fragile new identities. Hands seized fabric. Someone grabbed her arm, another her collar, a third yanked at her hair bun, unraveling it in a painful snap. The cafeteria noise dropped into a stunned hush, forks paused halfway to mouths. Mara's breath vanished. Her mind leapt backward to childhood, to being pulled from the surf by waves too strong to fight, to the helplessness that had haunted her nights since her father never came home. Her body reacted before thought, muscles locking, heart slamming so hard it hurt. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, the air too thin. She tried to speak, but the sound tangled in her throat, and what escaped was only that scream, the one that seemed to tear open something inside her chest. For the attackers, the moment stretched and warped. They felt powerful for half a second, justified in their imagined righteousness. But power built on misunderstanding is brittle, and it begins to crack quickly. 30 seconds can be an eternity when adrenaline drains and reality rushes back in. In that sliver of time, Tomas noticed the patch on Mara's jacket twisted sideways, the name barely visible. He remembered the roster from that morning, remembered a briefing he had half listened to while staring at the floor. Kellen felt something wet splash his knuckle and realized it was not spilled soup but tears. Ilya saw the way Mara's eyes weren't defiant but panicked, unfocused, the eyes of someone drowning on dry land. Around them, the environment sharpened into painful clarity. Sunlight glinted off the fallen tray, soup spreading like a stain. A clock on the far wall ticked loudly, absurdly loud. The smell of overcooked vegetables mixed with fear. Instructors were just beginning to turn, chairs scraping as authority gathered itself too late to prevent the first wound. The recruits' hands loosened almost in unison, the sudden release as jarring as the grab had been. Mara collapsed forward, catching herself on the table, breath coming in harsh, broken pulls. Her knees shook so violently she had to grip the edge to stay upright. The mistake revealed itself fully when a medical badge slipped from beneath her jacket and clattered to the floor. Mara wasn't just another recruit. She was a certified combat medic, fast-tracked because of her background volunteering with coastal rescue teams, because she had pulled strangers from wreckage and waves with a calm born of tragedy. She had been quiet not out of arrogance but because she carried a constant awareness of how quickly bodies break. She had been tense because crowds reminded her of chaos, not because she judged anyone around her. The realization hit the boys like cold water. Their imagined enemy dissolved, leaving only a shaking young woman they had just harmed. Shame settled heavy and suffocating. Kellen's chest tightened as memories of his own helplessness surged, the realization that he had become what he once feared. Ilya's hands trembled uncontrollably, the rewrite of his story collapsing into the same cruelty he had sworn to escape. Tomas felt a hollowness open in his stomach, a certainty that this moment would define him more than any drill score ever could. Authority finally arrived in a rush of boots and sharp gestures, but the deepest reckoning had already begun inside them. Mara was escorted to the infirmary, the walk down the sunlit corridor surreal and quiet. Each step felt like wading through water. The walls were lined with motivational posters she had never believed in, words about strength and unity that felt distant and ironic. In the sterile brightness of the medical room, she finally allowed herself to break. Tears came in waves, her body folding inward as she mourned not just the pain but the shattering of a fragile sense of safety she had been trying to build. Yet even there, compassion fought its way through fear. She catalogued her own symptoms automatically, grounding herself in training, reminding herself she was still here, still breathing. The aftermath rippled outward. Investigations began, consequences loomed, and whispers followed the recruits like shadows. But something unexpected also took root. Guilt turned into resolve. Under supervision, they attended mandatory counseling, forced to confront the stories they had been telling themselves about strength and respect. They learned about Mara's background, about her father, about the rescues she had led in storms that terrified seasoned sailors. The knowledge stripped away their justifications and left raw understanding behind. Weeks passed, daylight shifting from harsh summer glare to softer autumn gold. The cafeteria returned to routine, but the memory lingered in the way people moved more carefully around one another. Mara came back too, posture still guarded but eyes steadier. She threw herself into training with a quiet ferocity, determined not to let one moment define her entire path. The recruits watched from a distance, carrying the weight of what they had done, unsure if redemption was something they were allowed to hope for. The turning point came during a field exercise under a bright midday sky, the air crisp and clear. A simulated explosion sent chaos through the ranks, smoke rising, bodies shouting in confusion. Training turned real in a heartbeat when a recruit went down hard, leg twisted at a wrong angle. Panic surged, familiar and dangerous. Before instructors could intervene, Mara was already there, movements precise, voice steady even as her hands shook slightly. She stabilized the injury, her focus absolute, her presence a calm center in the storm. Kellen, Ilya, and Tomas found themselves assisting instinctively, following her lead without question. In that shared effort, something fragile but genuine formed, a thread of trust woven through action rather than words. Near the end of this story, if it has touched your heart, please support it in whatever way you can, because stories like this survive on shared empathy. Right before the final emotional closing, viewers are gently asked to leave a comment and share what this moment made them feel. The last image lingers in quiet sunlight. Mara stands outside the barracks, the sky wide above her, breathing in air that smells of pine and possibility. The past has not vanished, and scars remain, but they no longer own her. Nearby, 3 recruits train with renewed humility, each step a conscious choice to be better than they were. Life did not test them gently, and they failed in a moment that mattered. But in recognizing the mistake, in allowing shame to transform into accountability, they found a different kind of strength. The cafeteria incident became a lesson written not in punishment alone but in growth, reminding everyone who witnessed it that 30 seconds can break something precious, and a lifetime can be spent learning how to rebuild it with care.